Okay. Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Myself, my background. I grew up in Fort Worth. Actually born down in Austin, 1955. Daddy was in pharmacy school down there. Um, been in Fort Worth all my life, other than going off to the University of Texas to get a real education. Um, and St. Mary's Law School in 1980, and been there ever since.
How did, when you got out of law school, what did you do?
I actually graduated from law school May 17th, 1980. I went to work the next Monday morning at Tarrant County District Attorney's Office as an assistant district attorney, or at least as an unlicensed lawyer waiting to become licensed.
And how long were you a prosecutor?
We hung on barely 3 years. Just the nausea every day was just too much to tolerate. No, I stayed 3 years and had actually set out to do that, to steal and learn as much as I could. And that 3-year point came along, and I felt like I'd gained all the benefit I could out of that office, and I was ready to go to work.
I take it you had no intention of becoming a career prosecutor?
That never crossed my mind.
Why did you decide to become a criminal defense lawyer?
There was a guy named Dan Hurley who was an inspiration in my life. Actually, Dan Hurley inspired me before I was ever born. No, I know as y'all are doing this series, which is an awfully neat project, by the way, that's one of the questions come up, that how did you aspire to become a criminal defense lawyer? And there wasn't some lightning rod moment, and to say there would not be accurate, but came to work as an assistant prosecutor, and I was observing lawyers from the first moment I hit that office, and seeing the guys that looked like they knew what they were doing, who were professional, who seemed to take good care of their clients, and that was something I aspired to be part of. Needless to say, it wasn't too hard to figure out that those lawyers in private practice might be having a little more hefty tax return each year than I would as assistant prosecutor.
So you met some lawyers, saw some lawyers who you thought were above and beyond the average lawyers. Who were some of those people?
Back in Fort Worth in the early 80s, one of those gentlemen was Tim Evans. He had actually been out of the DA's office about 4 or 5 years at the time and tried some significant cases. There's a lawyer in Fort Worth named Jack Strickland, very, very talented lawyer. Jeff Kearney was a fine lawyer at that time. But there were also some older gentlemen, a gentleman named John Brady, who was just a consummate gentleman and fine lawyer. And what I actually set out to do was, as I was shopping cases to be tried, I figured out pretty early on I could go pick an easy win, or I could go try a fine lawyer, but I was going to learn a lot more about trying cases against good lawyers, and quite frankly, I gravitated towards that. Tried to slot those where I was against somebody who was so much more experienced than I was, and I could learn from, quite frankly.
Mark, did you find that the lawyers that were in the courtroom trying cases seemed to have more business than those that were working out all their cases or pleading them all guilty?
Well, your question was, do I find the lawyers that were actually trying cases to be more successful than the folks who were simply holding their clients' hands through a guilty plea? And, that goes without saying. The reputation gets out, the ability to represent people and the client, knowing how hard you worked for them, that builds upon itself. And yes, you could tell, just reputation-wise, from other lawyers, other clients just in the community, who truly was respected.
How did you first become involved in Texas Criminal Defense Lawyers Association?
I left the DA's office back in May of 1983 started working private practice. I remember attending a state bar advanced criminal law course in the summer of '83, and was just amazed at how much I did not know of just basic fundamental law. Back during that time, that course was strictly a law course. It was not a skills course. It was not an enhancement of your career course. It was simply, here's the law, chew it up and swallow it. And long about '84, there was a seminar over in Dallas, Criminal Defense Lawyers Project seminar I went to, and it was. I remember sitting in the audience, and I can't remember all the speakers. One was Weldon Holcomb, who passed away just this past year, and it was more oriented towards a combination of here's what the law is and here's ways to do things. And I figured out right away, I was not even a member of TCLA at that time in 1984, but I joined that seminar because I saw something in this club that was helping young lawyers, not just in what the law was, but skills and trial abilities and strategies and actually ethical responsibility in connection with being a criminal defense lawyer and representing clients.
You were president of TCDLA in what year?
2002 to 2003.
And I'm sure that as you walked or worked through the officer chain, you were involved in several committees and several different projects. What all have you done in TCDLA?
Man, the question ought to be, what have I not done in TCLA? We had a lot of fun in the late 90s and just after the year 2000, involved in the strike force for 5 years. And one of the things we had to do was figure out who we were going to help, who we weren't going to help. And there was actually a very loose application of you help a lawyer who's truly being abused and mistreated, but you don't help somebody who's so stupid they can't help themselves. And got called out several times to assist people in trouble, and which to this day I think is one of the wonderful aspects of TCLA, because no member sitting out there on an island by themselves. If we look across our membership in Texas Criminal Defense Bar Association, what we find is 98% of our people are solo practitioners. They may be in an office sharing arrangement, or they may be by themselves in an office, but they, for all intents and purposes, are a single lawyer. And they don't have the resource of the big civil firms with 35 folks at their back. But one of the beautiful parts of TCLA is the strike force allows them to have a membership at that time, only about 2,000 people at their back. And that was one of the fun parts of coming up through the officer chain.
What do you recall being some of the most significant events or periods during your tenure being an officer and president of TCDLA?
Danny, you probably remember when the project funding went from about $200,000 a year to well over $1 million overnight. And we went from a nice, cozy club with the staff of 3.5 people to having to, basically put on 11, 12 seminars a year, to all of a sudden jumping that up to 25 seminars a year and covering every corner of this state. That was challenging. That was demanding on staff. It was demanding on lawyers to be available as speakers. It required a great deal of travel. And one of the beautiful things, while it took a lot of work, I can look on as just a seamless transition, how we did that and took on the calling that the legislature gave the Court of Criminal Appeals, which gave to us the funds to make it happen. See all that expand and see all that take place is, looking back, was a pretty exciting time.
Let me ask you, you've seen TCDLA grow from, let's say, 500 members to 2,500 to 3,000 members. You've seen the annual budget go from 300,000 to almost 2 million. What role did Joseph Martinez play in any of that?
We hired Joseph Martinez in November of 2001. We had decided to make a change in the summer of 2001 for executive director, and that was a trying time. And we had to get that hire right. We had to pick the right person. I can remember traveling to Austin on 3 separate occasions for a series of interviews on Saturday morning at the state bar office. And we had a wide variety of people coming in. I remember him coming in for his interview, and there was something about him that I saw some integrity, I saw some energy. I didn't see a guy just here trying to get a job to draw a paycheck to make it to the next job. I saw a guy that seemed to have a genuine interest in us. And for the past now 6 years, I've just seen that flourish. He's ridden this little wave in of all the additional funding, all the different additional demands of the association, his staff, to go from, like I said, the cozy little 10 or 12 seminar a year to the 25 in every corner of the state. And more importantly, he's been an ambassador for the club. He is at every seminar that I'm aware of. I know he doesn't make every single one, but the lion's share. He is greeting members. He is asking how their families are. He is asking how their practices are. He genuinely wants to do what he can to help lawyers be better at what they do. And it's just fun to watch. It's been a wonderful addition to the family.
Mark, tell us a little bit about your most significant or interesting cases that you've had in your career. And by the way, how long have you been practicing?
Got licensed in November of '80, so 27 years, a little over 27 years now. Significant cases. There's been lots of trials, and that's really a good question, and I think it lends itself to a little more in-depth discussion. It's funny, as a criminal defense lawyer, we all look back at our 3, 5, 7 most significant trials, but I don't think a criminal defense lawyer should ever lose sight of the fact that whatever case he tries is probably the biggest forest fire of that client's life, whether it's DWI, whether it's a misdemeanor shoplifting case, whatever it might be. And while lawyers can look back on certainly lengthy, protracted trials and victories and certainly well-fought battles, we've got to make sure every time we go to the courtroom that we don't lose sight of the fact that the guy sitting next to us, this is his maybe most critical day of his life. And if you take that with you and you apply that kind of concern to what you're doing, you're going to have a better result. But back to the 3 or 4 significant cases, let me see if I can tap a couple. There was a case back in 1989 in Fort Worth. A man named Kenneth Reed Smith, he had kidnapped a little girl off the street, going to school. She was 9 years old, ended up sexually assaulted and strangled out in the wooded area of Fort Worth. It had just a tremendous amount of publicity associated with it because her name was Amy Thatcher, and they had a few bills that followed her to the legislature as always. Client had a long history of mental illness, mental disorders. The case itself had just generated a tremendous amount of publicity and quite frankly wrath and scorn towards my client. I remember Judge Don Leonard there in Fort Worth had called me one afternoon and said, "I've had 5 lawyers turn me down to take this. You want to get on board?" It's one of those things you couldn't say no to. But I made him promise me I get to pick my co-counsel, I get to pick my experts, and I don't want any obstructions in the way of financial requirements. And I got a hold of another president, former president of TCLA, Mike Heisel, and he and I set about, we were told the case would have a pretty quick trial date. And lo and behold, it started about 5 months later and was preceded by a competency hearing, a contested competency hearing. And then we went through well over 200 jurors to get a jury. And the case itself, the reason it's so significant is it took 4 months and 3 weeks to try from start to finish. It was one of those cases the prosecution had an enormous amount of pressure on them with regard to secure the death penalty. The punishment evidence was pretty damaging. The mental health issues there were questions about, but I remember starting in February. I remember ending up in June. And I remember in June we were successful in. Well, the other aspect of that time, as I recall, the new statute was just emerging in the 1991 legislature with the additional mitigation question, and there were specific challenges to what was formal 37071 death penalty statute in Texas that this case gave a nice format to challenge that structure. There was also a case that the entire community thought there was a foregone conclusion to the death penalty. We were fortunate to prevail upon a jury to vote in a different manner and actually ended up with a life sentence. But it was a viciously litigated case from the first day we walked in the courtroom until 4.5 months later. And it's one of those left you exhausted, left you literally spent. Other case.
Before you move
Yeah.
on to other cases, how many capital murder cases have you represented the accused?
Represented lots of capital murder cases. I've tried 10 cases to verdict.
How did those cases come out?
8 of those 10 resulted in life sentences. 2 of them we lost. One gentleman, a man named Kenneth Clark, was on a retrial. He spent 4 years on death row and got brought back, and he'd stabbed a fellow inmate while he was on death row, which didn't help us. So he got his own death penalty and actually died the following year of natural causes in death row, so I don't guess he's been executed. And then we lost one last year in 2006. A CODIS hit database, CODIS database DNA hit with 2 extra dead bodies laying around. Was a little cluttered, but we lost that case too. But we've been fortunate in 8 others.
You just recently completed a capital murder case. What month was that? September? Or?
We tried a case in Fort Worth. Stephen Hurd was the client from late August through first part of December this year. It was the first police officer death in line of duty. Fort Worth in 23 years, had a lot of publicity to it. Really a fascinating case from the aspect of the shooting reconstruction. It was a shooting incident in a mobile home that had 44 shots discharged, 9 of them by my client, 10 of them by my client, and 34 by police officers. And there were significant issues as to self-defense, significant issues as to mistake of fact, whether he knew he was a police officer or not. But the shooting reconstruction itself was challenging and fascinating and made the case. We were, we all think we're so smart in this business, sometimes find out we aren't. But it was very disappointing that they found my client guilty. I think a jury had to make a stretch to do that. We kind of learned that the rules are a little bit different. We got a police officer deceased. The law doesn't change, but the rules are different. And but fortunately, the jury found significant mitigating circumstances, and he's received a life sentence, which we received a lot of credit for, and I certainly appreciate the accolades. But at the end of the day, we lost the case, and it's something we set out to win. That may sound silly, but we were a little ambitious, probably.
Well, sometimes you can convince yourself of your client's innocence when
Somebody tells you different.
all around you feel otherwise. Would you agree with that?
I've experienced that more than once. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I know exactly how that feels.
Any other significant cases that you participated in?
A case that was just really, really enjoyable. Back in 1995, Danny Hurley from Lubbock called me one day, and there was a antitrust division, Department of Justice, doing some work in connection with plumbing supply companies out in the Plains, and introduced me to my then client, Cyril Reasoner. And Danny said about representing his plumbing company. I represented him individually. They had been a number of luncheon meetings in and around the Lubbock area with the various plumbing supply companies, discuss price fixing. And the client, Cyril Reasoner, was just one of those people we all relish today. We get to represent folks like that because we don't get people like that. He had pretty much been a self-made man. He'd come up in the plumbing industry, actually a plumber himself. He worked as a sales rep for a Rheem hot water heater company. He knew the plumbing industry backwards and forwards. He had taken a family-owned company where his two sons worked, and his wife was the receptionist and kind of the office overseer, and was one of those people with just an incredible amount of integrity. And the case rocked along a year or so, and lo and behold, there's an indictment came out. They even wanted to toss him a softball misdemeanor. And one of the true fun things was coming out to Lubbock, working with Dan Hurley, and walking into the office of some of those plumbing supply people who were cooperating with us for the government to kind of catch them off guard and say, we'd like to talk to you. They looked like they'd just seen a rattlesnake, which was fun. It was fun. But we tried the case in my recollection, February of '96. And I don't guess there's ever been another case in America. There was another co-defendant in the case, and I can't remember his name. I wish I could. Who was a corporate co-defendant represented by a lawyer out of Amarillo, who'd had a corporate representative already plead guilty, which is significant of the elements to find price fixing and antitrust violations. And we had tried the case, and quite frankly, we're so far ahead, jury found the right thing to do was quit Danny's client, Overcamp Supply, quit my client, Cyril Reasoner, and we're still trying to figure out how they did it, but they acquitted the Amarillo corporate defendant also, who had two officers plead guilty to price fixing.
Had you ever had a case where the federal judge recommended that the Justice Department investigate a perjury complaint on their chief witness?
No, that was the first. That man's name was Bill Luce.
Yeah.
And old Bill, bless his heart, Danny and I had walked into his office several months earlier, just kind of plopped down on him unannounced, and said we wanted to talk to him. And you could tell right then he was just he was a crawfishing human being. He stuttered. He was nervous, and you could tell he was probably a liar. And one of the funnest cross-examinations we ever had. And the client helped us find it, quite frankly, was he had made a statement to the effect that they'd had some meetings in Lubbock, luncheon meetings, and they all discussed we're going to run our prices up some. And lo and behold, he just knew full well that he saw in the industry over the next 3 months and 6 months, he saw that steady rise that they planned on and talked about. And we were fortunate enough to get hold of his own records, and if anything, there's a price decline. So, and it was, Danny helped set it up, but it was just one of those fun moments when you got a piece of paper sitting in front of a witness, and he said the same thing in front of the grand jury too. So the biggest task in that cross-examination effort was to cover every escape hatch for him. We spent no time doing that before we put the paper in front of him. And Judge Sam Cummings, who is not considered a liberal, at the conclusion of the case, had instructed I can't remember exactly how he said it, because the antitrust division was there, which was not the U.S. Attorney's Office, but did make a statement. He's going to request the U.S. Attorney's Office to look at the transcript of his trial testimony versus what he said at the grand jury to see if perjury accusations were in order. And I can't recall a better way to finish a case. You just got an acquittal. You're sky high. You have a salt earth client standing at your side, still trembling, and all of a sudden you hear a federal district judge say that the government's primary witness needs to be investigated for perjury, it's a good day. And Danny Hurley and I have had a lot of fun over the last 10 years talking about that. And I suspect we stretched that story about 6 different ways.
Well, Mark, any other significant cases that you'd want to talk about?
Oh, goodness, Hurley. Let's see. There's I had a real significant case this last year. A guy named Jimmy Adams in Fort Worth, and it had a tragic ending. He had had a cosmetic procedures company where women have some hair removed from private areas of their bodies, and the accusation was is when those procedures were going on, he might have placed his fingers in places they shouldn't have gone. And we had the primary accusation, the indictment, but we then had 7 extraneous offenses following this, and we all know how dangerous and damaging those are. And Jimmy suffered with some pretty severe heart problems, and quite frankly, the case was very trying, but I had enormous concern that when we tried the case as to whether he'd walk out of there on a gurney or on his own 2 feet, just because of the amount of stress a trial generates, and his accompanying heart problems. And I had actually worked out an agreement a week before trial with a civil lawyer representing all these women that had sued him for a financial settlement, coupled with a probation from the state. It was wrapped up in a nice, neat package. Never worked so hard in my life just to put together a package. And everybody's in place, and he looked at me and said, "I ain't gonna do it." And that was 1 hour before trial. So we started trial and tried the case for a week and a half, 2 weeks, and we're fortunate to get a 2-ordered verdict last February. He was laying on the bench in the hallway of the courtroom having a heart attack when the verdict came in. And had a judge that, bless her heart, wasn't even sympathetic to that, so we had to kind of prop him up, wheel him in there. Took the verdict, which was an acquittal, and the state just couldn't help themselves. They were ready to go to work on these other 7 or 8 extraneous offenses and try those. And they got to generating. About 4 weeks later, he knew a second trial was coming, and actually took his own life. Pretty tragic. But that left a pretty deep impression.
Sure. Mark, what advice would you have for young lawyers just getting out of law school right now and maybe having an interest in criminal law?
Well, if you're going to be involved in criminal defense practice in Texas, to not be a member of TCLA is reprehensible. As a young lawyer, you have the resource, we already talked about, the strike force. You have access to the finest CLE in America on criminal law topics. You have access to meet with the most outstanding lawyers from every corner of the state and draw from their knowledge. So certainly join, but don't just join and be in the membership roster. Join TCLA and come and meet lawyers. And to a young lawyer, what I would say is, don't be afraid to walk up to a guy you've seen at the podium speaking and introduce yourself and tell him where you're from and what your practice consists of and what you're trying to do. And then when you see him again, do the same thing again. And you develop a camaraderie, you develop a network where there may be some issue arises in your office or your practice next month, next year, and you pick up the phone and call that person. And I think what you'll find is people who are very receptive to helping other lawyers, regardless of who they are. So join, come, introduce yourself, and be active. And I've seen so many young lawyers do that. Now all of a sudden I see them on the board of directors. Now all of a sudden I see them in the officer chain. Now all of a sudden I see them at the podium being the speakers. The other thing is, as you come, as you attend seminars, I mean, I'm the world's biggest thief. I've sat in seminars for years, and I don't think I've ever had original thought in my life. But I can steal, and I can listen to what other people do, and I can refine it and make it fit what I'm trying to do. And it's the only place I know of that thievery is legal, and you need to take advantage of that resource. It's a tremendous asset to a young lawyer. Other aspect of I guess what I'd say to a young lawyer, you've got to be trying cases, and you don't become a better trial lawyer by watching others. You don't really become a better trial lawyer just jump in the courtroom and do it. You become a better trial lawyer by preparing meticulously for your battles and then having battles. And if I had to pick out some small piece of advice, find your DWIs, your plain vanilla DWI cases. Your first time offenders, nobody's going to get hurt. There's hardly a judge in the state going to put those people in jail. And last time I checked, everybody that stood next to a lawyer in front of the bench and pled guilty got found guilty, in my experience. So pick those cases out and go try them. Yeah, you might lose a few, but so what? You'll be better next time. You'll be better the next time. And sooner or later, you become very, very comfortable with what you're doing, which is the trademark of an experienced lawyer. So spend some time in trial. You'll never get better not doing it.
Mark, there's only one certainty, and that certainty is one of these days we're going to all die. What would you want to be remembered for, or what would you want to have as a lasting impression? If TCDLA members got together and over a cocktail discussed Mark Daniel, what would you want them to say?
Oh, goodness gracious, Ernie, that's a loaded question. If I had to think of the qualities and traits in a top-notch criminal defense lawyer that we ought to exhibit, that I would have strived and would hope I would attain, first off, humility is something that so many are lacking in, and it's such a premium quality, not only in people but lawyers especially. And if you look at what we do, yeah, we have victories, but the truth be known, much of our work is in damage control. But additionally, when you have a victory, you're really going to have to go see that person who was the loser probably the next month or two. And you don't need to gloat. You don't need to be something you're not. But the quality I admire most in lawyers is just basic humility. We're all just God's creatures. And I guess the quality that I most despise is arrogance. And we've all seen it. And while we maybe track that person briefly, arrogant people aren't the folks that we have long-term relationships with. Secondly, I guess to answer your question, I would hope that somebody might say Mark Daniel was an humble person. I would hope that comes out. But more importantly, or of equal importance, I guess I should say, criminal lawyers and criminal defense lawyers, for some reason, have been at the lowest rung of the ladder in professional perception in the legal profession, and that breaks my heart. To me, it is so sad, and it's also wrong. And the reason it's wrong is, if you look at the legal profession as a whole, look at the folks who are really lawyers, who are really trial lawyers, you're going to find the best of the best in the criminal defense practice. Not because they're so blastedly talented or so superbly intelligent. It's because they try cases. That's what they do. And the finest lawyers in the criminal defense practice. And if nothing else, and I'm looking at the camera now to say this, as criminal lawyers go about their practice, we must do everything we can do to enhance and improve the perception of our field, of our criminal defense field. How do we do that? One, get involved in local bar associations. A few years back, I got involved in the Tarrant County Bar Association, not because I had some long-lost love for it, but I was hoping I could leave my field of practice with a better perception of Fort Worth and Tarrant County because of it. I encourage lawyers, and I like to wear boots and jeans or tennis shoes on a Friday as much as anybody, but if I go to the courthouse, I think a lawyer ought to be seen in a coat and tie. It improves our perception. Do everything you can to improve the perception of the criminal defense lawyer. Don't sit out in the hallway of your courtroom and talk in a negative fashion towards your client. That's unprofessional. That isn't what we need to do. If we'll all do that, if we'll all roll up our sleeves, if we'll all make a commitment to enhancing the image of the criminal defense lawyer, maybe 10 years from now, maybe 20 years from now, maybe we'll be on the second rung. I don't know. But if nothing else, I'd like to be remembered as somebody who did everything he could to not only improve the practice, but improve the image of the criminal defense lawyer throughout the profession. Because we are the finest trial lawyers in the legal profession. There's no question in my mind.
Thank you very much.